Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode here from Gwiglet, your one-stop YouTube channel for all things books, beards and beyond. Today is my first ever video on Alice Walker's The Colour Purple, a seminal text of modern literature. And today I'll be sharing with you what I feel are 10 key quotes from the novel itself. If you haven't already, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, share it with all your friends and hit that bell icon for more content. Also, we are available on Instagram and TikTok as well, where we're giving more hints, tips, and advice. So, what can you do with this video? As always, feel free to take notes, pause it as you go, ask questions in the comments. The Gwiglet guarantee is I do get back to every comment as we go. In addition, be sure to use it as a revision tool, either alone or with classmates, so you can help boost your understanding. You could also use this as a form of mind maps, creating the quotations and building different quote banks with it. And it helps you to list examples as you practice for those all-important examinations. So the aim of today's video is to cover 10 specific quotes, and with that I'll be looking at the key words, key phrases, which will be underlined in each example, and a little bit of a content warning, I suppose. With some of the quotes, they will be censored owing to the more graphic nature of them. So let's begin with the very first quotation I've selected. Said by Seeley, "I'm poor, I am black, I may be ugly and can't cook, a voice say to everything listening, but I am here." Now, a few really important things to notice from this that I've underlined. First of all, she references herself in the ways that she feels she is oppressed, and she actually is oppressed in the novel. Now, by her looks, her poverty, her race, but also notice the fact that the spelling of poor is in her Georgian dialect. And I think a really important thing I tried to impress upon all my students who are studying this book for the first time is that you really want to appreciate the tones and the dialect of Seeley's native tongue in that Georgian dialect to really understand and get a full feel of where she comes from, because there's a real sense of the kind of spoken tradition within that. Now, within this quote as well, there are some other important things to acknowledge. For instance, the very fact that when she says this, we get one of the first moments she acknowledges her actual lived existence. Seeley openly starts out feeling worthless due to years of abuse, trauma and neglect. Now, this line is important because it shows her struggle for self-worth and the beginning of her long journey towards self-empowerment and self-emancipation. Its tone is raw and heartbreaking, but it also shows her resilience. Now, the second quotation I've picked is a shorter one, again said by Seeley. "The more I wonder, the more I love." Here, Seeley, as our protagonist, is reflecting on her growth as a person. We see that repetition of more, this idea of her gaining and growing in her lived experience. As she begins to question the world around her and open her heart to new ideas, especially seen through the lens of her relationship with Shug, Avery, who is part lover, part almost mentor to her, part role model, she discovers the transformative power of love. It's a major turning point in the novel where curiosity ultimately leads to that sense of personal liberation that's inherent and at the core of Seeley's journey. Now, the third quote I selected here, again said by Seeley, but slightly later on in the novel, "Until you do right by me, everything you think about is going to crumble." Now, this line and its power spoken by Seeley to Mr. Blank or Albert or Mr., the man who has oppressed her for so long in the course of the text. This symbolises Seeley reclaiming her power and her dignity. After years of suffering, she finally stands up for herself, and this line reflects both her empowerment and her belief in a spiritual, karmic justice in the novel itself. Now, the following quote is our first one said by a separate character that isn't our protagonist, by Shug Avery, where she says, "I think it God off if you walk by the colour purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it." Now, what's prescient about this is the line that lends itself to the title of the novel. The colour purple comes through a number of times in the text as something of decadence, of something of rarity and opulence. However, what she's saying in this line encapsulates one of the novel's central themes of finding beauty in the world despite the hardship one encounters. Here, Shug encourages Seeley to see God not as a punishing figure, but as the beauty of the world itself. It's a radical shift in this perspective, a turning point, if you will, that helps Seeley reframe her identity and, in turn, her spirituality. Now, the fifth quote I've selected here again comes from Shug, where she says, "Everything want to be loved, us sing and dance and holler, just trying to be loved." Now, I think there's a real importance here in this idea of sing, dance, holler. These verbs come through often in the novel. This sense of singing is a real recurring motif in the novel as well. This idea of expressive joy is really important. But what she's saying here in this is a kind of another universal truth that everything, everyone desires love and recognition. In The Colour Purple, characters long for love. When they don't receive it, they suffer. In turn, this quote emphasises the need for emotional connection and human understanding, which again comes back to one of the core elements of the novel. Now moving on to quote 6, we have the final address in the novel, which is said by Seeley in the last letter, which says, "Dear God, dear stars, dear trees, dear sky, dear peoples, dear everything, dear God." In Seeley's final letter, marking the moment she no longer directly addresses her letters solely and squarely to God, whereas previously these letters had almost a prayer intonation to them, she's now addressing the world itself. In doing this, Walker is showing her growth from an isolated, oppressed woman to someone who sees herself as part of a larger, interconnected universe. In doing so, Seeley has learned that the divine, the spiritual is in everything around her, but most importantly, within herself. Carrying on here, we then go to quote 7 I've selected here, where this quote from Sophia says, "Folks don't like nobody being too proud or too free." Here in this quote, Sophia speaks to the theme of societal oppression, and we often see this intersectionality of not only oppression by gender, but oppression by race, particularly of African American women in the novel. Sophia's pride and independence are seen as threats in the novel, and she is often punished for them and subjugated as a result. Now, this quote highlights how the novel critiques systemic oppression and the ways it tries to break down individuals who step outside of their perceived societal norms. This idea of free and freedom not being something that is easily afforded, if at all, to the women in the novel especially. Now, taking it back a little bit here, I've selected quote 8 as one of the first lines, one of the earliest quotes in the novel. You better not never tell nobody but God. Now, this is one of the earliest quotes in the novel itself, and what it does is encapsulates the trauma of Seeley's abuse. This command is not only horrifying in tone, but it symbolises the oppression and silence forced on Seeley by her abuser from the very beginning. The opening of our novel is brutal in its level of trauma and abuse. So Seeley's letters to God become her only outlet. This line shows the oppressive power of keeping trauma hidden. Now, our penultimate quote I've selected here derives from Shug, and it goes as follows. People think pleasing God is all God cares about, but any fool living in the world can see it always trying to please us back. And this line, Shug, complements the earlier discussion that we mentioned of spirituality in the novel itself. Here, Shug instead shifts Seeley's perception of God, teaching her that God isn't just a figure to be feared, a man or worshipped. Instead, God is everywhere in an almost Blakean sense, that God is in nature, in beauty, in human experience and human joy. Now, this concept's crucial for Seeley in helping her find solitude and happiness and peace that extends beyond her personal lived suffering. And the final quotation I've selected for today is, I'm free, I'm free. Now, this moment is simple in itself, but also profound. Seeley declares her freedom and the power in it that is undeniable. She's free from Mister's control, free from her past pain, and free to live her life on her own terms. This tone is triumphant, and a triumphant moment that shows just how far she has come on her journey of self-discovery, which in the plot itself is so integral to The Colour Purple. So there you have it, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Have any questions, please feel free to drop a comment. I will get back to every single one. If you don't already, feel free to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And until next time, take care, all the very best, and